the iron womb that never lets you die. The first thing you learn inside the iron womb is that death is not the worst ending. Death would be mercy, and mercy is the one thing the machine was built to deny. Burning. The first thing I feel is burning. The caustic amniotic suspension eats at the stumps that used to be my arms, not so much at the flesh. There is not much flesh left there. It eats at the nerves. Every exposed ending burns as if someone dragged sandpaper across it and left it that way, without bandage, without painkiller, forever. I want to scream, and the scream is born somewhere deep down, in the place where I once had a throat. But what comes out is only static crackle, the shriek of an overloaded speaker, ruined, torn, never meant for screaming, a Vox grill instead of a lower jaw. I feel it vibrate. I feel every cursed seam where it was stitched into my flesh, absolute darkness. My eyes seem to still be there. Someone did not bother to cut them out, but the visor glass is shuttered dead. I am floating. Warm yellowish fluid, stinking of carrion and chemicals, fills the sarcophagus to the brim, and I breathe it in because my lungs are gone too. Something breathes for me. Some mechanism latched to the remains of my bronchi pumps this filth back and forth, imitating breath. This liquid is not food, and it is not medicine. It is a chemical medium in which the remnants of my body do not die, but cannot heal either. A suspended state between life and decay, and every nerve that still works burns from touching it. The shock is so strong that I lose count of the seconds. The body, what is left of it, arches in the fluid, strikes the wall of the capsule, and the cables plugged into my spine pull tight like leashes. I am a dog on a chain. I do not know that yet. I still think this is temporary. A voice outside, muffled as if underwater, the clatter of tools. Someone knocks on the hull and my whole world shudders. Nerve node response normal, pain response above average. Good, good. I recognize that tone. Not the voice, the tone. That is how butchers speak in a slaughterhouse when they check whether the animal is still alive. A working tone. Not a drop of respect, not a shadow of fear. The one outside is not afraid of me, and for some reason that frightens me more than the burning. Once, perhaps thousands of years ago, though in truth it may have been only a few weeks, I stood on the bridge of a battle cruiser and men bowed when I approached. Mortals fell to their faces. Even my starborn brothers lowered their gaze when I passed. I was a champion. I carried the blessing of the gods. And now there is a knock on the hull, and a brisk note in an inventory ledger. Another strike. Here pain has become my sight. I see nothing, but pain has light. White is shock. Red is burning meat. Black is what comes after, when consciousness falls away for a second and then returns at once, because they will not let me die. Preservation proceeding within standard limits, the voice outside says. Marked as combat ready. Hold 4, Zeta section, suspend him. Suspend him. I will remember that word forever. The silence after he left was worse than the pain. Pain is at least an event. It comes, it goes, it has rhythm. Silence is nothing. Emptiness. I hung in the dark, and the only proof that I still existed was the bubbling of the fluid near my ears and the dull, steady ache where the cables entered flesh. I tried to count time. 1 second, bubble 2, bubble 3. I lost count at 147, began again, lost count at 203. Then I gave up. Time in the sarcophagus is like water in a sieve. It passes through you, does not pause, leaves no trace. At some point I realized that I had forgotten when they hung me there. An hour ago. A day. The brain of a starborn can track time to the minute. Internal clocks placed there at creation working on biorhythms. But the cables had done something to that mechanism. Ruined the calibration, or the demon had eaten it, or the amniotic medium had dissolved the part of the brain that measured duration. I did not know. I knew nothing. A click, hydraulics. They are dragging me somewhere. Chains scrape over metal, and the whole sarcophagus swings like a pendulum. I try to move what is left of my right arm and feel the stump press against some mechanism. Servos. I am connected to something large, something much larger than my body. I feel the contours of that thing with nerve endings I should not have. A phantom map of alien anatomy laid over my own. Legs. I have legs again. Two massive supports, their joints answering with dull pain when I try to bend them. But they are locked. The signal vanishes into emptiness. Arms. One ends in something like a claw, the other in a barrel I cannot identify. All of it is silent, sleeping, waiting. And I wait in the dark, in the caustic sludge, in the silence broken only by the bubbling sound of my artificial breathing and the distant hammering of the ship's engines, which I feel through the vibration of the chains. Once such sarcophagi were called honored war coffins. Now they are called hellbound engines. In that new name there is less honor and more truth. I had heard stories before I ended up here. I had heard brothers whisper in the corridors of the cruiser, telling one another about those taken to the forge. One veteran, an old one of the sons of Vorath, one of those who remembered the Wolf King alive, once spoke to me over a mug of bitter brew. Do you know the difference between an honored war coffin and a hellbound engine? An honored war coffin is a warrior who continues to serve. A hellbound engine is a warrior they continue to use. Feel the difference. I laughed then and said something like, "That will not happen to me. I will become a demon sovereign before I lose so much as one limb." The old warrior looked at me then for a long time in silence, with that expression people have when they know more than they say, and he answered nothing. He simply finished his bitter brew and left. I wonder if he is still alive. I wonder if he remembers that conversation. I wonder if he knows that I am now living proof of his words. My name is Draven, champion of the Ashen Legion, killer of worlds, candidate for demon sovereign, if the rumors I myself spread are to be believed. And now I am the contents of a can. Meat in a tin shell, marked with an inventory number and hung out to dry in the hold beside boxes of ammunition and spare parts. How did I get here? A good question. I have eternity to answer it because eternity is exactly what I have been given. The rain on Cinderheart had been falling for the 4th month in a row. Not water, but acid drizzle, fine and stinking, making the paint on armor blister and peel away in strips. We stood in trenches, and the trenches were more like ditches filled with reddish slurry that reached even a space marine to the knees. Mortal slaves, cultists, cannon fodder sank in it up to the chest. Some drowned literally. A man would stumble, fall face first, and the current would suck him in. Corpses drifted to drainage grates, and no one pulled them out. I stood at the edge of the command dugout, a fortified pit roofed with armor plates, and looked over the battlefield through the lenses of my helm. Ahead lay 3 kilometers of burned mud, studded with the carcasses of machines. Our transports, their iron haulers, a broken basilisk tank with its turret torn away, now serving as a landmark. Shoot left of the headless one, my warriors would say, and everyone knew what that meant. Beyond the field was the city, or rather what was left of it. 4 blocks of industrial buildings, a defensive line of the stellar soldiery, reinforced with concrete bastions and automated turrets. We had been breaking that line for 6 weeks. 6 cursed weeks. We had lost 2 squads, 20 brothers, 20 warriors of the Long War, some carrying weapons from the days of the Cradle World, and had advanced a miserable kilometer and a half. Commander Mailer said over the Vox, young, sharp, ambitious, one of those raised to starborn rank after the rebellion, one of the later brothers grown within the eye, 100 years old, perhaps 120, a pup by our measure, but a pup who knew how to fight. 3rd Company has crossed the bridge. They request fire support. Let them wait. I will lead the flank strike myself when darkness falls. I knew what he was thinking. Darkness would fall in 8 hours. 3rd Company would not last that long, but he did not say it aloud. Mailer was clever. He never argued openly. He only waited for me to make a mistake. I felt felt his patient hunger, his courteous smile, his habit of standing slightly closer than necessary when we discussed plans. Any commander of the Ashen Legion lives with a knife at his throat. Loyalty here is an agreement that lasts only as long as you win. The moment you stumble, the one behind you is already trying on your cloak. But I did not fear Mailer. I feared no one. I was Draven, the young hawk of Cinderheart, and I was going to take that line and then rise higher. Champion of the gods chosen. The road to ascension lay across mountains of other people's corpses, and I had not yet tired of walking it. Darkness fell. The acid drizzle thickened into a true downpour. We climbed out of the trenches. 27 brothers, a company of cultists in support, heavy weapons on stretchers. I walked ahead, always ahead. Chain sword in my right hand, bolter in my left. Mud sucked at the boots of power armor, and every step left a hollow that filled at once with water. Mailer walked on my right. He carried a plasma weapon, a trophy from a dead guard sergeant, retuned by our armorer. A beautiful thing. If only he had not pointed it at my back every time he thought I did not notice. 200 meters to the outer perimeter, Brask reported. My scout. An old warrior who had survived 4 Black Crusades under Malachar, silent as stone. I trusted him more than anyone in the squad. Turrets at 14 Alpha and 14 Beta are silent, either jammed or shut down. Or a trap, Mailer said. Or a trap, Brask agreed. Move, I said. We moved in silence. 27 pairs of boots churned the mud, and acid rain beat on shoulder plates, running down in yellow rivulets. The cultists hobbled behind us, wheezing and stumbling. A miserable sight. Mortals we drove before us to slaughter and now dragged behind like baggage. But they died willingly, and that was their only value. Brask raised a fist. Stop signal. We froze. He listened. The enhanced hearing of a starborn caught what no human could hear. Then he lowered his hand. Clear engine noise at 8 o'clock. Their armor is pulling back. Or regrouping, Mailer muttered. Or regrouping, Brask agreed again. I noticed the way they looked at each other. Quickly, almost invisibly. 2 men who understood one another. When had that happened? When had my best scout begun exchanging glances with my lieutenant? A week ago, a month, no matter. After the battle, I would deal with it. After the battle, I dealt with everything. That was what I told myself. And every after the battle became before the next one, and my hands never reached it. Move, I repeated. Because Draven always moved forward. Because doubt is weakness, and weakness is death. It was a trap. Of course it was a trap. We passed through the outer perimeter, crossed the first row of obstacles, and then the searchlights woke. Dozens of beams struck the dark, and we stood in the middle of a lit field, visible as beetles on a white wall. The turrets that had been silent turned as one. Heavy bolters opened fire. I remember the first minute clearly. Flashes, whistles, the screams of cultists being torn apart. The brothers spread out. 10,000 years of war give reflexes that work faster than thought. I shouted orders and the company wheeled, answering fire with fire. Brask dropped behind the wreck of an iron hauler and fired in short bursts, aiming at the searchlights. One shattered, then another. Darkness retreated a little from our flank. Mailer, on the right, knelt and methodically fired into the bunker embrasures. The plasma gun hissed. Every shot left a hole in the concrete the size of a fist. Commander, fall back, Farron shouted. Young, too young, perhaps 40 years old. His first serious battle. We do not fall back, I roared. We are the Ashen Legion. We are the heirs of Vorath. We passed through the cradle. We survived the eye. We marched through 13 Black Crusades under Malachar. No guardsman will stop us. Beautiful words. Empty, hot, familiar. I had spoken them thousands of times on hundreds of worlds, and every time they worked. Brothers clenched their teeth, gripped their weapons tighter, and moved forward. War is a ritual, and ritual demands litanies. My litanies were about blood and glory. I rose to my full height deliberately, theatrically, so the brothers would see. A champion does not hide. The chain sword howled. Its teeth spun, scattering drops of old blood. I took one step forward, and then the plasma came. I did not see the shot. I did not even hear it. Only light. Blinding, bluish-white. It struck me in the lower torso, and the world split into two pieces, before and after. Before, I stood. After, I lay face down in mud, and below my waist there was nothing. Literally nothing. The plasma charge had vaporized thighs, knees, shins. My clotting organs were already trying to seal the wound, though below the waist there was nothing to save. The monstrous resilience of the starborn and the cataleptic node would not let consciousness fade. They held me on this side, denying me the mercy of darkness. My legs were gone. I lay in a reddish puddle, steam rising from me. Melted flesh smoked under the rain. The smell of burned meat, my own smell. I remember trying to stand, trying to rise on my arms to pull myself up, because a champion of the gods cannot lie in the mud. Draven does not crawl. Draven moves forward. My arms buckled. I fell face first into the sludge and swallowed water mixed with someone else's blood. Heavy steps, power armor, Mailer. He stood over me and looked down. The visor of his helm reflected the searchlights. I could not see his face, but I knew he was smiling. He had waited for this moment. Perhaps not in this form. Perhaps he had imagined something more theatrical. A knife in the back, poison, a challenge to single combat. But war had given him a gift. His commander lay in the mud, legless, helpless, and no one was there to defend him. The seconds stretched into eternity. I waited for him to raise the bolter, waited for him to shoot me in the face and tell the squad, the commander has fallen, I take command. That had been done in the Legion 1,000 times. I had done it myself twice. All around, battle thundered. Heavy bolters hammered our positions. Somewhere to the left, a grenade exploded. A short, cut-off scream, cultist by the pitch. Starborn screamed differently, lower, less often, without shrillness. And I lay in the mud, and the rain beat on my back, and the drizzle ate into the enamel of my armor, and Mailer stood over me. I saw his eyes through the visor, or I knew what he saw. He saw a cripple, a stump meat. What I had become in half a second, from champion of the gods to a legless piece of burned flesh. And in his eyes I read something worse than hatred, worse than contempt. Calculation, clean, sober calculation. He was weighing options, measuring consequences, building a plan. Brask fell beside me, heavily, armor on its side, not wounded, simply taking position. He saw me. "Commander." Alive, I rasped. Legs, lost my legs. Brask looked down. Where my legs had been, something black and melted smoked. Armor plate had run in droplets, mixed with flesh. Even a veteran of 4 crusades froze for a second. "Rift Smith," Mailer said, quickly, confidently, as if the decision had already been made. Perhaps it had been made long ago. "We carry him to the ship. The master will put him on his feet." On his feet, the irony. Mailer had always known how to choose words. He bent down, took me by the shoulder plate and dragged me. "Hold on, Commander," he said over the vox. "I will get you out." And I, fool that I was, believed him. The way back to the landing zone took forever. Mailer dragged me through the mud, and I felt the stumps of my legs drawing grooves in the sodden earth. The melted edges of the wound caught on stones, and every pull sent another wave of pain through me. I clenched my teeth and stayed silent, because a champion does not scream from pain. A champion endures. Brask covered us, shooting the guardsmen who tried to come around the flank. Farron carried my chain sword. For some reason he had picked it up and dragged it with him like a sacred relic. Young idiot. Within a year Mailer would take that sword for himself, and Farron would watch in silence while the new commander hung the trophy on the wall of the cabin that had once belonged to me. The shuttle stood behind a hill covered with camouflage netting. The pilot was mortal, one of those loyal slaves who served our ships. He saw me and turned away. Quickly, instinctively, the way people turn away from the mutilated. They loaded me into the cargo bay, laid me on the metal deck, and Mailer strapped my armor to the clamps. "Course for Ashclaw," he ordered. "Upper deck, Smith's workshop." I heard the engines howl, heard the shuttle lift from the ground, felt gravity press me into the floor. Below remained Cinderheart Tertia, my last battle on my own legs, my last battle as a champion. I did not know it yet. I still thought the smith would repair me, fit prosthetics, graft on new legs, implant bionics. I had seen it happen. Brothers returned from workshops with new limbs, sometimes better than the old. Steel fingers that crushed stone, legs with strengthened servos that let them run faster than any mortal. I thought it would be the same for me. That in a month I would stand, take a new sword, walk onto the bridge and say to Mailer, "Thank you for the rescue, Lieutenant. Now let us return to business." The ship hummed. I lay on the floor of the cargo bay and listened to the vibration of the engines, while acid blood slowly dried on my armor, turning into a black crust. The last hours of my former life, and I spent them dreaming dreams that would never come true. I woke to the smell. White-hot metal, burned oil, something Swedish like a rotting fruit thrown into a furnace. The ceiling above me was low, rusty, hung with chains and hooks. Somewhere to the right, furnaces droned. The heat reached even the stumps of my body. Pipes ran along the walls, thick and pulsing like veins in a living organism. Dark liquid dripped from some of them, gathering in puddles on the floor. The air shook with the vibration of unseen mechanisms. Deep below, beneath the deck, something worked, something shifted, something breathed. The Rift Forge was not a workshop in the ordinary sense. It was a womb, a place where monsters were born. I lay on something metal and cold, an operating table. My arms were bound to brackets. Why, I had no legs. Where could I go? He stood at the end of the table, the Rift Smith. I did not know his name. No one did. They called him Scalpel or Master or simply the one from the upper deck. Long ago he had been one of the Iron Sons, a deserter, a mercenary, a Heerdek who sold his skills to anyone who paid in blood, captives, dark ether. The Ashen Legion had used him for about 200 years. He built machines for us and we gave him material. His face, properly speaking, was gone. Half the skull had been replaced by machinery. Pistons, lenses, tubes disappearing beneath a hood. The lower jaw was steel, mobile, with teeth that clicked when he spoke. From his back protruded 6 or 7 mechadendrites, long and flexible. Each ended in its own tool, cutter, drill, injector, clamp. They moved constantly, independent of one another, like snakes in a basket. "Awake," he said, without the intonation of a question. "Where is my squad?" My voice rasped. My throat was dry, scraped raw, but still mine, still with a jaw. "Fighting, they do not need you anymore. I need an honored war coffin, a revered battle sarcophagus, any preserved frame worthy of a warrior of my rank." The mechadendrites froze, all at once, as if on command. Then the Rift Smith slowly turned toward me what served him as a head. "An honored sarcophagus," he repeated. "A relic walker, if you have even one, or an ordinary old-school chassis. I do not care, only not the kennel. I am Champion Draven. I have earned it." He laughed. The sound was like a rusty jack grinding, mechanical, stripped of human warmth, and yet entirely sincere. He laughed for a long time. A minute, maybe 2. I lay bound and listened to him laugh and felt something inside me begin to crack. "A relic walker," he said when the laughter ended. "We lost the last relic walker at Veilgate. I have 2 old bone furnace bodies, both relics older than the rebellion itself, and I will not give either one to a middling butcher. To you, champion, I will give what I have, and what I have is this." One mechadendrite pointed left. I turned my head, my neck still worked, and I saw it. It stood in the corner of the workshop, suspended on chains like a carcass in a butcher's shop. Massive, hunched, ugly. Black metal covered not with rust but with scabbed growth, something living, pulsing like a vein at the temple. The armor had been melted and remade so many times that it had lost all symmetry. The left arm was a claw, 4 piston fingers with hydraulic joints, each as thick as a human thigh. The right was the barrel of a multi-melta, grown into the shoulder like a tumor. The head, there was no head. Where a war coffin should have had a visor, there gaped a hollow, a blind pit behind which one could guess at the sarcophagus chamber. And it breathed. I saw it, a quiet rhythmic trembling of the hull as if something inside turned in its sleep. The metal at the seams glistened with moisture. The smell from it was so strong that even a starborn wanted to turn away. Sour, animal, like a bandage that had not been changed in a week. "This is," I began. "A hellbound engine," the smith said. "You are fortunate. The previous pilot lasted 11 years. By the end there was so little mind and so much burned nerve mass left that I had to open the sarcophagus and flush it out, but the frame is fully functional. I added a few modifications." He approached the machine and patted its hull. Fondly, as a groom pats a horse. The mechadendrites slid over the armor, checking living seams. One dove into the open sarcophagus and emerged glistening with slime. "Not something grand inside it," the smith continued. His voice grew almost tender, like a master speaking of a favorite project. "A small but ravenous rift creature, perfect for a hellbound engine. It feeds on the pilot's rage. The more fury, the faster the engines. The last one, what was his name? Arthos, I think. For the first 2 years he tried to break out. Every battle he fought the controls, tried to turn the machine around and run. The Daemon loved that. They say Arthos destroyed 6 basilisk tanks in 12 minutes during his final battle, then burned out. His nervous system went out like a fuse. But what an ending!" He clicked his steel jaw, like a gourmet after a good meal. "And before Arthos there was Vaynar of the Chantbound. He prayed at first, sat inside and prayed to Lauren, to demons, to someone else. Prayed for 7 years, then stopped. And that was when things became truly good. When hope ends, rage becomes pure, unclouded. In his last months, Vaynar accelerated so hard the servos could not bear it. I replaced his knee joints 3 times. Good days. I will not be in that." "You will." "I am a champion of the Ashen Legion. I demand." The smith turned and his steel jaw clicked, once, again, as if he were chewing my title. "Champion? Do you know how many champions have passed through my workshop in the last 3 centuries? 11. 11 pompous dead men, every one of them demanding and deserving. 7 became hellbound engines. 2 became thrall engines. 1 eye smelted for parts because too little was left of him. And the last became something entertaining, but that is a story for another time." He leaned over me. Red lenses in place of eyes stared unblinking into my face from a palm's distance. "You are the 12th, and you will be a hellbound engine because that is all your stump is worth. Mailer brought you here and paid for the installation. He commands the company now. Your company. And he needs fire support, not another colleague with grievances." I jerked against the restraints. The brackets held. The smith's mechadendrites curled around my stumps, needles biting into muscle. Something cold poured through my veins. Paralytic, sedative, poison. I did not know. "Quiet," he said. "Quiet. It will hurt very much, but you will get used to it." The mechadendrites lifted me from the table, light as a rag doll because half the body was gone, and carried me to the hellbound engine. I saw the front panel of the sarcophagus open. Inside was a vat filled with yellow-green fluid, amniotic suspension. It bubbled in tiny blisters, and from it came the caustic chemical smell that I would now smell forever. They lowered me into the sludge slowly. First the stumps of the legs, and pain as if I were standing under the plasma shot again. Then the torso. My ribs burned and I screamed. The scream rolled across the workshop, bounced from the walls, mingled with the clank of chains and the drone of furnaces. Cables, thick, black. The smith's mechadendrites pressed interface spikes into my spine one by one, methodically, like hammering nails. The first between the 3rd and 4th vertebrae crunch. pain, white and blinding. The second at the base of the skull. The world blinked and for a second became different. I saw the workshop through the machine's eyes, dimly, crookedly, through a grainy visor flooded with static. Then darkness again. Connection interrupted. Stabilizing, the smith said somewhere above. 12 hours to full integration. You may scream. No one here will hear. The third spike into the base of the neck. The fourth into the left temple. With every connection, my world narrowed. I stopped feeling my body and began feeling the machine. Its joints, its damage, its hunger, dull, bestial, electrical, as if the armor itself wanted to move, tear, crush. And somewhere on the edge of consciousness, an alien whisper. Quiet, oily. The voice of the rift creature bound into the machine, fused into its circuits. It did not speak in words. It spoke in sensations. Fury, hatred, hunger. I felt it the way you feel heat when you stand too close to a furnace. I realized I was crying. The tears mixed with the amniotic suspension, one of the last gestures left to my body. In place of my jaw, they fitted a Vox grill. Metal, cold, with wires that at once grew into flesh. An individual customization by the master. His signature touch, by which any hellbound engine from his forge could be recognized. Done, the smith said. Now you can only scream. That is all you will need. Shaking thunder, engine roar vibrating through every bolt in the hull. A drop pod. I feel its shape around me, feel the walls compress my steel shoulders. Pressed in, locked in place like a shell in a magazine. How much time has passed since the workshop? I do not know. Hours, days, weeks. In the darkness of the sarcophagus, time does not exist. There were periods when I simply hung in the hold and listened to the engine's hammer. There were moments when I tried to move the machine's limbs, and the neurospikes at the base of my skull flared with pain as punishment. A safety system. Hellbound engines are not activated before the moment of use. We are chained like rabid beasts, because even a remnant of the pilot's soul can send the machine into uncontrolled fury. We are weapons, and weapons are kept in the arsenal. But now they have activated me. The visor came on. The world flooded into my mind like a bucket of ice water thrown in my face. But it was not my world, not the one I remembered. The colors were wrong. Red had an orange cast, the sky looked green, human faces were blurred patches stripped of detail. The hellbound visor did not see the way my eyes had seen. It saw heat, movement, threat. Every silhouette on the battlefield was painted with colored markers. Blue for hours, red for targets. No category of neutral existed. The doors of the pod fell away, and I stepped out. The first step, the ground shook. I felt it through the sensors in the feet. Dull pressure, resistance of soil, gravel, stone, the fragments of something. I was enormous. 3.5 meters of deranged steel crowned with claw and gun. The air smelled of powder, burning plastic and blood. Somewhere to the left, a tank burned. I saw a column of greasy smoke pierced by orange flashes. Ahead, a defensive line. Trenches, concrete emplacements, low bunkers with narrow embrasures. Imperial guardsmen. I saw their small, scurrying red markers. There were many of them. They swarmed in the trenches like ants in a torn, open anthill, and some were already firing at me. La's beams drew smoky lines through the air and died uselessly against my frontal armor. A voice over the Vox, squad channel. My old channel, the one I had tuned myself back on Cinderheart. Draven direction, 12 o'clock, releasing the leash. Mailer, his voice. The same frequency range, the same clipped manner. Only now he was not asking permission. He was guiding the beast, pointing out the victim. My name in his mouth sounded like a call sign. Not champion, not commander, simply Draven. Like the name of a dog. Like a shout at oxen harnessed to a cart. I wanted to answer. Wanted to say, I remember you. I remember how you stood over me in the mud and smiled. I remember how you carried me to the butcher's table while pretending loyalty. I know what you did, and I know why. I opened my mouth, or rather sent a signal to the Vox grill, and from the speakers burst not a voice but a roar. Distorted, hoarse, mechanical, words drowned in static. I tried again. Me lore. Draven move, confirm. At his signal, the limiters loosened. Pain circuits shifted, driving me forward. The sarcophagus lunged toward the marked target and the machine dragged me with it. Servos howled, and the heavy hull moved across the field, gathering speed. Each step drove stones into the ground, leaving hollows a palm's depth. Mailer did not truly control me. He only indicated the victim and loosened the chain, and the sarcophagus hurled itself forward, driven by the hunger of the rift creature inside. The ground underfoot was strewn with fragments. Concrete rebar, spent shells, scraps of cloth. I stepped on something soft and heard a crunch. I did not look down. The visor automatically outlined every body in red and immediately discarded it. Target destroyed. Proceed to next. The dead did not exist to the machine. Only the living. Only those who could still be killed. I saw them, my squad, my brothers. They ran behind me, sheltering behind my hull, using me as a mobile parapet. Power armor, black and gold, smeared with mud and soot. I recognized Brask. He ran on the left, hunched, bolter ready. He did not even look at me, as if I were a wall convenient to hide behind. As if inside this steel there were no man he had known for decades. I recognized Farron, young from the last reinforcement. Farron, perhaps the only one of them, looked at me quickly while running. In his gaze I read fear, pity, disgust, perhaps all at once. A second later he turned away and ran on. And Mailer. Mailer walked directly behind me, calm, confident as a master walks behind his dog, bolter in hand, helmet removed. He liked to fight barefaced. A smile. That same courteous, patient smile I had seen hundreds of times, only now it was directed at my back. Good work, Draven, continue. 4 words. Good work, Draven, continue. That is how cattle are praised. That is how one strokes the neck of a hunting beast that has brought down prey. The guardsmen opened heavier fire. Autocannons, maybe even a Las cannon from the bunker. Shells hammered my armor like hail on an iron roof. One struck the shoulder joint. I felt pain, dull and distant like toothache in a dream. The armor held. I was made for this. To move forward and take blows while those behind me remained whole and unhurt. A walking shield. That is what I had become. A living ram wrapped in armor, filled with chemical filth and malice. A thing that takes fire upon itself so the real warriors, those who still have legs, hands, faces, names, can calmly do their work. I struck the first position with the claw. The concrete wall of the bunker burst like an eggshell, and inside came screams, bodies flickering in the dim light of emergency lamps. Guardsmen, young, terrified, indented helmets and dirty uniforms. One fired a Las pistol at my face. The beam scratched the visor and left not even a mark. I seized him with the claw, squeezed, felt armor crack, then bones, then something soft, wet, yielding. I threw him aside. And in that moment, rage. It did not come from outside. It rose from the machine, from those circuits where the rift creature hid. A wave of red-hot, senseless hatred poured into my brain like molten lead into a mold. My thoughts flooded. I stopped seeing people. I saw only targets, and targets had to be destroyed. The claw worked. The multi-melta spat fire. The hull turned, crushed, broke. Somewhere very far away at the bottom of that current I was still myself. Draven champion. I still remembered what I wanted to do. Turn around, find Mailer, crush him as I crushed these guardsmen, avenge myself. Show him that I was not a tool, not a weapon, not an inventory number in his arsenal. I sent a signal to the servos. Turn 180 degrees. The legs jerked, began to pivot, and pain came so hard that the world turned white. The neurospikes at the base of my skull flared like red-hot nails. The sarcophagus drove a pain impulse of such force into the nerve circuits that I screamed, and the Vox grill choked on a shriek. The legs turned forward again, toward the enemy, because the rift inside the machine would not let me turn away from killing. I tried again and again. 5 times, 10, 20. Each attempt ended in pain, stronger each time, more precise, as if the machine were learning to punish me more effectively. On the 5th attempt, I lost control of the claw for 3 seconds. It hung useless. On the 10th, motor control shut down completely, and I froze in the middle of the field, motionless as a statue, while the system rebooted. In those seconds of stillness, I heard everything. The crackle of burning machines, distant cries of the wounded, wind whistling between ruins, and closer, much closer, the even wet breathing of my sarcophagus. The leech machine latched to my remains, pumping fluid, renewing the chemical balance of the medium, feeding stimulants into nerve nodes. It cared for me in its way. As livestock is cared for before slaughter, so the meat remains fresh, so the beast has strength enough to walk to the killing floor. The rift moved inside me. I felt it as one feels another person's breath on the neck in a dark room. It was pleased. I had just spent a mad amount of nerve energy trying to break free, and all that energy had gone to it. My rebellion was a feast. My screams dessert. And the more furiously I beat against the walls of my cage, the fuller it would grow, and the faster my legs would run toward the next victim. Draven, what is wrong with you? Mailer over the Vox, irritated. 2 o'clock target, opening the leash. The limiters shifted, pain circuits redirected, and the sarcophagus hurled itself toward the indicated sector. The machine obeyed him, not me. The legs moved. The claw rose. The multi-melta aligned. And then I understood. I was not the pilot. I was not even the operator. I was fuel. My pain, my rage, my madness were the combustible matter the rift creature inside the machine used to move. The angrier I became, the faster it ran. The more desperately I tried to break free, the more energy it wrung from me. I was a battery, a living, suffering, screaming battery inside the womb of a steel monster. Mailer laughed over the Vox, briefly, softly, perhaps not even for me. I killed guardsmen until evening, tore trenches open, crushed firing points, burned bunkers. Blood ran from the claw like oil from a hot pan inside the sarcophagus, caustic sludge, pain, the demon's whisper, and my own scream caught in the Vox grill. Endless, soundless, meaningless. At some point, perhaps an hour later, perhaps 3, I stopped resisting, simply let go. And then something strange happened. The rift calmed. Rage receded like a tide, and for a few seconds I saw the battlefield with my own eyes. Not red markers, not heat stains, but truly. Gray sky, black smoke, bodies, dozens of bodies scattered across the mud. One guardsman, young, perhaps 20 years old, lay directly beneath my foot. His helmet had rolled aside. An ordinary human face with freckles and a thin scar on the chin. Mouth slightly open, eyes glassy. He had not even had time to be afraid. I had once been a human who became something greater. Starborn, warrior, then traitor, then champion, then stump, then machine. Every step had seemed an ascent, and had turned out to be a fall. A staircase leading downward, built so that all along the way you believe you are climbing. The demon stirred, sensing weakness. Rage flooded back, red and hot. My hands clenched with a life of their own, and again I became a weapon, a beast, a battery. Once I dreamed of ascension, becoming a demon sovereign, rising above flesh, above death, above all others. Gods, if you hear me, this is a joke, is it not? You gave me immortality. You gave me power. You took everything else. Toward evening, Mailer loosened the leash toward the left flank. A company of guardsmen held there, stubbornly dug in with a pair of autocannons and a missile launcher. A rocket struck my chest. Explosion, smoke, grinding metal, and I felt shrapnel enter the soft tissues of the sarcophagus. Pain. The demon howled with pleasure and flung my machine forward through wire across a minefield. Mines popped underfoot like firecrackers, and I smashed into their position with such speed that the first trench line simply folded beneath my weight. People ran, threw down weapons, pulled off helmets, waved their hands. We surrender, we surrender. I saw it through the visor. Red markers blinked. Target, target, target. The demon did not care. By then neither did I. By then I no longer distinguished where my rage ended and its hunger began. The claw worked. The multi-melta spat. People screamed and died, and every death fed the furnace that my consciousness had become. He stood in the middle of the street, alone, without cover, without a squad, power armor of dark gray, without any chapter markings I could read through the grainy visor. Perhaps gray wardens, perhaps someone from the Stormbound, perhaps an order I had never heard of. It did not matter. Something else mattered. A psychic hood, massive, with cables running into the collar of the armor, with a crystalline focusing circuit that shimmered bluish through smoke and dust. A mind warden, an imperial psyker in power armor, with a force staff in his right hand and a bolt pistol in his left. He stood and looked at me calmly, without fear, without hatred, without disgust. Though I had seen guardsmen scatter from me with twisted faces, though I knew how I looked. 4 meters of filthy, leaking, scab-grown metal, crowned with claw and cannon, with a red visor and a vox grill instead of a mouth. A monster from a nightmare. The embodiment of everything the Empire had fought for thousands of years. And he stood firmly in place. My sensors locked on him, a single red marker on the visor. Target. The demon inside the machine was already pulling me forward. Pain circuits shifted. Legs began to accelerate. I took 1 step, 2, 3. The multi-melta aimed. And then he did something no enemy I had met had ever done. He lowered his weapon. The staff rested at his foot like a banner. The pistol went into its holster, arms at his sides, open, defenseless. I could have burned him with the multi-melta in half a second. I could have crushed him with the claw like an insect. But he stood, and from his psychic hood came a wave. I felt it where the wires ended and what remained of me began. The rift twitched. Inside the sarcophagus, something whimpered. The demon sensed the psychic presence and recoiled like a dog from fire. For the first time since the smith had shoved me into this can, the demon fell silent, retreated for a moment, went quiet as if someone had covered it with a hand. My legs stopped by themselves, without pain impulse, without limiters. I stood in the middle of the ruined street, 20 meters from the mind warden, and for the first time in a month, my brain belonged to me. Then he spoke. Not over the vox, not aloud. I heard him here inside in the capsule, in the sludge, in the little piece of gray matter that still remembered it had once been Draven. The voice was quiet, steady, with that special texture only psychic speech has, as if words enter the brain directly, bypassing ears, speakers, wires. I hear you. 3 words. I froze. I hear you beneath this iron, beneath the shape of this beast. You are still alive. My claws loosened. The multi-melta lowered. Something inside me, something I had believed long dead, long dissolved in amniotic sludge, twitched and lifted its head, like an animal grown used to darkness that suddenly sees light. I tried to answer, sent a signal to the vox grill, and this time without the demon's interference, without distortion. What came from the speaker was not a roar but sound, almost a voice, hoarse, broken, barely intelligible, but a voice. Help me. The mind warden took a step toward me, the staff still at his foot, hands open. I saw his face. He wore no helm. There was no pity, no horror there, only focus, attention, like a physician bending over a dying patient. I can help, he said aloud, softly, and his voice echoed from the broken walls. I feel the thing inside is weak. I can suppress it for a short time, perhaps enough for you too. He did not finish. The rift returned in a jerk, like a hand pulled away from flame and thrust back in at once. A wave of rage, thick, molten, uncontrolled, flooded my brain. The limiters squealed and opened. Pain circuits flared. Legs lunged forward. The claw rose. Inside, silently, with everything I had left, I screamed. I screamed, stop, stop, not him, anyone, not him. But the scream drowned in the red wave like a stone in a swamp. The demon was hungry. The demon was angry. The demon was afraid. The psychic touch had burned it, and now it wanted to destroy the source of pain. My legs ran, my arms reached, my mouth, the Vox grill, roared with a beast's roar. The Mind Warden raised the staff, too late. He had waited for an answer, waited for contact, waited for the man inside the machine to overpower the demon. He believed in that. He was wrong. My claw struck him in the chest. Power armor, good armor, work from the red foundries, held but the strike of a hellbound engine, tons multiplied by momentum, multiplied by the fury of a rift beast, is not something one man withstands, even a starborn. His feet left the ground. He flew 3 meters and struck the wall with his back, and the wall cracked, and the staff flew from his hand, ringing on the stones. He tried to rise. The psychic hood sparked, damaged by the impact. The suppressing wave weakened. The rift howled in triumph. I approached slowly. Every step was a sentence. The Mind Warden raised his head. Blood on his face from a split temple. Gray eyes, calm, without hatred. Even then he looked at me, not at the machine, and said, "I heard you. You are still alive. Remember that." My claw closed. Crunch. I stood over him and looked at what remained. Power armor crushed at the point of impact, blood on the stones, the staff 3 meters away, dark and dead as an ordinary stick. The man who, for the first time in my existence in this can, had spoken to me as to the living, who had heard me, not the roar, not the grinding, not the shriek of the Vox grill, but me, Draven, and who had died for it. The rift purred, pleased, sated. It had eaten my horror and my grief, and it felt good, and it wanted more. My legs were already carrying me onward to the next target, the next victim. But his words remained, lodged in my brain like a shard of shrapnel in armor, impossible to dig out, impossible to forget, impossible to dissolve. You are still alive, remember that. Why remember? What am I supposed to do with that knowledge here, in acid sludge, in a steel womb, with a demon instead of a heart and an inventory number instead of a name? What am I supposed to do with the fact that I am still alive? I do not know. And that is the worst of it. Worse than pain, worse than rage, worse than darkness. Because until that moment I could comfort myself with the thought that Draven was gone, that in this can there was only meat, fuel, a battery, a machine that sometimes remembered it had been someone. But the Mind Warden, cursed, dead, crushed Mind Warden, proved otherwise. He found me alive, real, still able to ask for help. And I killed him for it. I moved on because the machine ordered movement, and because to stop would have meant being alone with what I had done, with the one I had lost, with what I, apparently, still was. The battlefield emptied. The guardsmen retreated or died. Their trenches smoked, bunkers gaped with breaches, streets were piled with bodies and wreckage. I stood amid all that ruin, breathing heavily through synthetic lungs, while the multi-melta still rotated its focusing lenses, seeking targets that no longer existed. I did not want to stop. The demon inside did not want to stop. We, for the first time, because in battle the boundary between me and the machine blurred, wanted to keep moving, crushing, burning, tearing. The legs stamped in place like a horse held by the bridle. The claw opened and closed, servos whining from strain. Then I saw them. 4 mortals hunched in heavy aprons of tanned leather, forged servants, not warriors, faces covered by respirator masks from beneath which protruded bundles of cables and antennae. Each carried a long rod, thick as a finger with a tip that crackled with blue discharges. Shock prods, cattle goads, ugly, dirty craftsmen assigned to hellbound engines like handlers to dangerous stallions. They came toward me calmly, without fear, as men approach an animal they know. Unit Zeta 7, the first said, "Deactivation, prepare for transport." I turned the hull toward them. The claw rose. The multi-melta aimed. One strike and those 4 would have become 4 greasy stains on the stones. A quiet click electronic somewhere deep in my sarcophagus. A remote signal. A rift technical command sewn into the limiters. Legs locked, knees locked, claw locked, multi-melta locked. I stood motionless as a monument and could not move a single joint. They approached. The first jabbed the rod into my knee joint. Discharge ran through the servos and the leg buckled. I dropped to one knee. A strike to the back to the shoulder joint. The arm hung slack. Another strike. Second leg. I fell to all fours, then onto my belly. The ground struck the visor and the world split into cracks. They stood over me, 4 men with wrenches and shock rods. One busily unscrewed a fastening on my back, the access hatch to the nerve cables. Another checked the amniotic fluid level, picking at the drainage valve like a plumber at a clogged pipe. Aggression level 7 out of 10 above average. Note in the log, hull damage minimal, claw overheated, allow to cool before next use. Pilot stable, psychic degradation within normal limits. They spoke of me the way the Smith had spoken when we first met. Working tone, inventory ledger, maintenance of a combat equipment unit. I wanted to scream, and from the Vox grill came a rasp. Weak, pathetic, like the whine of a cornered animal. "Oh, it still vocalizes," one of the cultists said. "Resilient. Good, record it. Pilot retains basic speech attempts after 6th deployment. Recommendation, continue use." The second cultist crouched beside the place where the Hellbound engine had something like a head. He pulled a small cogitator from his belt, battered, with a cracked screen, and began recording data, muttering to himself. Amniotic fluid consumption within permissible range. Sarcophagus temperature 38.2. Neural degradation coefficient. He paused, checking the readings. 17% from baseline. Not bad. Arthos had 23% by the 6th deployment. 17%. That meant 17% of my brain no longer worked as it should. Neurons burned out by demonic stimulants. Nerve nodes destroyed by the endless cycle of pain and fury. Memories I had lost without even noticing. Which ones? What have I already forgotten? My mother's face. Once I had had a mother somewhere on some planet in some life before implantation, before gene seed, before all of it. Almost nothing remained of that life. A fragment of smell, a shadow of a voice, warmth, perhaps real, perhaps invented. And now even that fragment may have been erased. Perhaps today, perhaps long ago. The third cultist was working on my claw, opening the pistons with a special key, removing lodged fragments, pieces of armor, bone, something soft and dark that he shook from the mechanism with disgust. Organic material in the joint mechanism. Recommendation, flush after each deployment, otherwise it will jam. Organic material. That was what he called what remained of the people I had killed. Material in the joint mechanism. A blockage to be cleared. They fastened transport chains to my hull. Thick, heavy chains with hooks that bit into the joints. Then a tow crawler came, a rusted track platform driven by a thrall engine, and dragged me back to the landing zone face down over the stones. The visor scraped the pavement, throwing sparks, and every jolt answered with pain in the cables plugged into my spine. On the way we passed another Hellbound engine standing active on perimeter watch. I saw it through scratches in the visor. A massive figure hung with growths and trophies. Red coloring, champbound, judging by the remains of heraldry. It turned its hull as we passed, and its yellow, cloudy oculars stared at me for a second. Then it turned away without interest, without sympathy. A beast looks at another beast and sees nothing but a rival. We are the same, former warriors, former commanders, now inventory. Behind me came the voices of brothers, my brothers, former brothers. Worked well enough, someone said. Perhaps Farron, perhaps someone else. It tore up 2 companies of meat and a mined warden in one sortie, Mailer answered. Wait until next time. The master says it has not reached full power yet. After a couple more drops, the demon will finish chewing through its sanity, and then it will run twice as fast. And after that a new pilot, meat is consumed, the machine remains. Laughter not loud, companionable like after a successful hunt. The toe crawler dragged me toward the shuttle, and I counted stones by sound. Knock, knock, each strike against the visor, and I tried not to think about what consumed meant. In the shuttle they secured me in the cargo bay on my side, facing the bulkhead. The visor still worked, and I saw rivets in the wall, rusty streaks, an 8-pointed star scratched there by someone. Some earlier passenger, a cultist, a slave, perhaps a hellbound engine like me, had left his mark. Through the bulkhead I heard voices. The brothers, my former brothers, discussed the battle, counted losses, divided trophies, argued tactics. Ordinary conversations after an ordinary operation. Someone told how a heavy bolter jammed at the worst possible moment. Someone boasted of a precise shot. Someone complained about the quality of ammunition. Not one of them mentioned me. Not one said, "Draven worked well today." Or, "Did you see how he tore that bunker open?" Or even, "I wonder if he still understands anything in there." Nothing. I was no longer part of their conversations, no longer part of their world. I was cargo in the cargo bay, heavy, inconvenient, requiring maintenance. Like a spare engine, like a crate of shells. On approach to Ashclaw, the shuttle jolted. Docking clamps closed, and I struck the bulkhead. The visor cracked diagonally. Through the crack I saw the cargo hatch open, and beyond it the cruiser hold. Vast, dark, stinking of oil and old metal. Chains hung from the ceiling like vines in an iron jungle, and on those chains silhouettes. Dark, massive, motionless. Other hellbound engines. My neighbors, my family. Darkness, chains. They hung me between two bulkheads like a side of meat in a cold room. Hooks bit into the joints of my arms, steel, heavy, useless without the released leash. My legs dangled above the deck, not reaching the floor by half a meter. The hull swayed with every maneuver of the ship. A slight roll to the right and I swung like a pendulum. And the chains creaked, creaked, creaked. They shut off the optics first. Click, and the visor died, and the world became darkness again. Then hearing. The low-frequency drone of the engine thinned, weakened, became a distant pulse. And then silence. Absolute silence in which you hear only your own thoughts and the bubbling of fluid in the sarcophagus. I floated in amniotic suspension. It burned in a familiar way, evenly, without pause. Pain became a background like rain outside a window. You know it is there, but stop noticing it. Then you notice it again, then stop again. Round and round without end. Thoughts, they were the only thing I had left. The only thing the machine could not take, yet. The smith said the previous pilot lasted 11 years. 11. By the end, burned nerve mass and full loss of reason. I thought about that, tried to imagine what it is like to feel your mind leaking out neuron by neuron, like water from a cracked cup. Do you lose memory first, or the ability to think, or does it happen all at once, a click, and you cease to exist while the sarcophagus finishes eating an empty shell? 6 deployments, 6 battles. I remembered each one. Rage, killing, being herded back. Between them, darkness and silence. How much time had passed? A month, a year. Time in the sarcophagus has no shape. No dawns, no sunsets, no other voices, nothing to hold on to. I tried to remember my life before internment. Mountains on the recruitment world. No, I forgot its name, forgot the first loss. The monastery, initiation scars, hot iron on the left forearm, a boy taken from an ordinary family. He had a mother, a father, perhaps brothers. Gene seed implantation erased almost all of the previous life, leaving only vague shadows. The taste of blood, someone else's. No, my own, dripping from a split lip after sparring. The smell of weapon oil. The voice of a sergeant whose name I had also forgotten. You will be great or you will be dead. There is no third path. The rebellion, the uprising. The choice that seemed obvious while Voreth still stood and became a curse when he fell. Flight into the eye of dread. Centuries of war, raids, black crusades. Nameless planets, nameless enemies. Ascent. Career. A company, my own company. the title of champion, the blessing of the gods or what I took for blessing. I had been so close. One more victory and one more sacrifice, one more ritual and ascension. Demon sovereign, immortality, freedom from flesh, from pain, from death. Mailer knew that. Everyone knew. That was why he did not kill me on that field. To kill a champion is to invite the wrath of the gods. Better to save him and entomb him in a hellbound engine. Formally, he saved his commander. Formally, he fulfilled his duty. In truth, he buried me alive in a steel womb and took everything that was mine. Brilliant when you think about it. I would have done the same, perhaps I had. I do not remember. My pride, it is still here inside like phantom pain in an amputated hand. I feel it. It pulses, itches, gives no peace. I was Draven. I could have become everything and became an inventory line in the Rift Smith's ledger. Zeta 7 Hellbound Engine, expendable material, meat in a can. The demon shifted quietly at the edge of consciousness. It waited patiently, like a spider in a web waited for me to break at last, for rage and despair to fill me to the brim, and then it would drink it all to the last drop and run faster, tear more viciously, while nothing remained of me but a shell, an empty sack of nerve endings generating pain for someone else's engine. 11 years, the previous pilot and me, how long do I have? More or less. Starborn are durable. Perhaps 20 years, perhaps 50, perhaps centuries of caustic sludge, darkness, and pain before the brain finally yields. The stronger the mind, the longer it resists, the longer I remain myself, the longer I remember. A century. A quiet crackle came from the Vox grill. Even the speakers had been shut down. The soundless cry of a dead machine in the darkness of the hold. Sometimes between periods of silence I hear the others, other hellbound engines. They also hang in the hold nearby on neighboring hooks like carcasses in a freezer. I cannot see them. The optics are dead, but I feel the vibration when they sway on their chains. Sometimes one begins to howl softly, drawn out, on a frequency no human ear can hear, but my sarcophagus catches. An electronic wail like the crying of a newborn, amplified and distorted beyond recognition. I do not know who it is. Perhaps the one from the chantbound. Perhaps someone else. Perhaps there are 5 here, 10, 20. A whole collection of former champions, former heroes, former men, suspended in darkness like holiday ornaments out of season. Once between the 4th and 5th deployments in one of the endless periods of darkness, I tried to speak to the demon. Not command it, not subdue it, simply speak. I directed a thought to the place where I felt its presence, to the dark corner of consciousness from which heat and malice seeped. What is your name? Silence. Then a sensation. Not a word, not an image. Something like laughter but without sound. As if something very large and very hungry found it amusing that dinner was trying to start a conversation. You are trapped too. We are both in one cage. Another sensation, contemptuous, as if the rift had said, I am not in the cage, I am the cage, you are inside me, not the other way around. I did not speak to it again. Somewhere above, life continues. Brothers sleep, eat, sharpen weapons, argue, betray one another, pray to dark gods, dream of ascension. Mailer has probably already taken my cloak, my cabin, my share of the spoils. Perhaps he has found a new goal. The next world, the next war, the next step toward becoming a demon sovereign. He will walk my path, and he will be smarter and more careful, and behind his back will walk a heap of steel that was once his commander and now obediently tears enemies apart on command. Funny. Perhaps one day, in 10 years, in 20, in 100, Mailer will stumble too. A plasma charge, an orc axe, betrayal by the next lieutenant. And someone as young and patient as he once was will drag him to the Rift Smith's table, and the smith will flush my sarcophagus, shake out what remains of my brain, and shove Mailer inside. And then perhaps, for one sweet burning second, justice will exist. But that is a dream, and dreams here dissolve together with neurons. I remember Arthos, that first pilot. The smith spoke of him without pity, like a part that had exhausted its service life. 11 years, 6 basilisk tanks in the last battle, then Flushing, new occupant. The circle closed, but Arthos at least forgot. The nerve mass burned out, and with it went memory, pain, understanding. I envy him. I envy his oblivion, because oblivion is also freedom, the only freedom left to me. But the mind warden left me a gift worse than any acid. He said, "You are still alive." And now I cannot pretend otherwise. Cannot hide behind, I am only a machine, only fuel, only meat in a can. I am alive. And that knowledge burns harder than the amniotic filth. I do not know when, but for now I will hang in the hold and wait. Wait until they activate me. Wait until the doors of the drop pod open. Wait until rage floods the brain and the demon takes control. And my steel hands, not mine, never mine, begin again to crush, tear, kill. And after that, darkness again, chains again, caustic sludge again, silence again, eternity. I prayed once long ago before the Ashen Legion, when I wore other colors and muttered litanies without understanding the words. Then I abandoned prayer. Then I cursed. Then I begged. Karn, Slythe, Zin, Morgul, anyone, give me ascension. Give me power. Give me the path upward. They gave it. Here it is, my path, down into sludge, into a steel womb where caustic filth eats my nerves and a demon eats my reason. And the only thing I can do is count. Count days I cannot tell apart. Count pains that have become one endless pain. Count breaths the machine takes for me. Inhale, bubble, exhale, bubble, inhale, bubble, exhale. I remember the smell of weapon oil on the morning before battle. I remember cleaning my chain sword methodically, tooth by tooth, removing old blood and applying fresh grease. I remember the weight of a bolter in my hand, certain and proper, like the handshake of an old friend. I remember standing on the ship's bridge and looking at the stars through the viewport. The stars were white, bright, real, not grainy stains on a visor. I remember taste, the vile synthetic ration from the ship's galley, flavorless paste with a hint of plastic, hated by everyone and eaten by everyone. But now I would give everything, all my pride, all my titles, for one mouthful of that wretched paste, simply because I had a jaw with which to chew, teeth, a tongue, hands with which to hold a spoon. All of it is lost forever, and the only thing that remains is the memory of it. Somewhere in the ship, engines began to hum. The vibration passed through the chains and I swayed. Left, right, left. A new course, a new target, a new world to destroy. One day, perhaps in a month, perhaps in a year, they will switch my optics on again. Load me into a pod, fit me into the magazine like a shell. And I will step onto a field again and tear, crush, burn. Mailer will stand behind my back, sheltering behind my hull, pointing out victims, loosening the leash, laughing over the Vox. And when my brain finally burns to ash, the smith will flush the sarcophagus, shove a new failure inside, and Zeta 7 will stand again. The machine remains, meat is consumed. I try to remember the name of the planet where I was remade. I cannot, forgot. Somewhere at the other end of the galaxy, on planets I have never heard of, there are warriors who have not yet reached my level of skill, champions still standing on their own legs, commanders still giving orders. They dream of ascension. They kill, sacrifice, betray for power, for glory, for the favor of the gods. They believe the path leads upward. I believe that too. Then a plasma charge took my legs, a lieutenant took my company, the smith took my jaw, and the demon took my will. And I found myself here, in sludge, in darkness, on a hook, in the hold. And I understood that up and down in this universe are the same direction. The caustic filth keeps burning. The demon keeps waiting. The chains keep creaking. And somewhere far away, beyond the walls of the hold, beyond the armor of the ship, beyond the void of space, planets turn, stars burn, civilizations die. War does not end. It never ends. 10,000 years and not one day of peace. We, the Ashen Legion, repeated it like a mantra, only war, eternal war. I thought I understood what that meant. I thought I was ready. Now I know. No one is ready. No one understands what forever is until he finds himself on the far side of the word. 17% gone, 83 remain. I count. Somewhere in the darkness to my right, another hellbound engine quietly howls on a frequency only we can hear. We are the suspended. We are the forgotten. We are those who walked toward the stars and reached a steel grave.